Welcome to City Legal and the Sam and Mark show. We welcome you to this talk, to breakfast and to sharing some time with us. City Legal exists so that you can ask the bigger questions for suits and city workers right around Australia. And because of technology, we're not just constrained to Sydney or the CBD, we're all around Australia and today potentially at home if that's where you're located. Now, if you're new to City Legal, either here in person or remotely, we welcome you. And the format of today is that we have a talk from Sam, and then we have an opportunity to ask questions. Now, there's at least 4 ways to ask questions. One of them is live, and Todd's very kindly offered to move around with the roaming mic. The second way is to use the little response sheet that is on the tables and to let us know your feedback with a question. The third way is to text the mobile, which is also in the chat, but probably if you're online, the best way is to hit the Slido link that's there and to ask a question. Now, it may be that a question hasn't quite formed in your mind as to what it would be, but you can see some other questions and you can vote on those questions. So you can see 3 questions. You might think the last one's actually the better one. So click it a couple of times. Well, click it once and vote it up the line, and maybe someone else will agree, and then that will help Todd with the questions later on. Now, Sam, can I just ask you a question or two, apart from the fact that you love karaoke and you're a father of 3 boys, which is a little bit curious about karaoke affections. One thing I do know about you is that you love low and slow cooking. Now, I'm a more recent practitioner of that art, but can you tell me how that grabbed you?
Well, low and slow cooking is the Texas way of barbecuing. So I had a road trip through Texas only a few years ago to go to a conference, and I tasted Texas barbecue for the first time. I thought, oh, this is what they rave about. Like, you see it on TV, you read about it, but until you're actually in Texas eating and tasting it, then you understand what they talk about. And then it begins this whole journey where you try to reproduce what you ate in Texas, and it's impossible. Like, you get close to it, but you can never get it just right. And I think you and I were joking about it, like, no, not being sexist and all that, but, you know, the big stereotypes are, you know, like division of household duties. Usually the wife does the cooking, the guy does the roofing, the guttering and the lawn mowing. Like, it doesn't have to be, but traditionally ends up being that way. But somehow when it comes to barbecuing, that becomes the guy's role, which is really just cooking, but with fire. And then suddenly the men become very territorial. Like, no, this is what I'm doing. Do not touch my meat. And it's funny because it just means once there's fire and danger involved, suddenly the men are interested. So I reckon guys would do the dishes and the vacuuming if you made it dangerous.
Okay.
Introduce some fire into the vacuuming, and then men will be doing it.
So I've seen at Costco a brisket that's about half as big as the table here. How do you, with 3 sons that, yeah, sure, they're sons, but and your good wife, how do they get through an entire 8 kilo, 10 kilo, something?
Yeah,
like
these things are 8 to 10 kilograms, and it's insane. We get through about 1/3 of it, and then we give away the rest or keep it for leftovers.
Fabulous. Now, and how does that, do you invite friends, or is it, you know, anything?
Yeah, we invite heaps and heaps and heaps of friends. And you have to, because when you cook it, they can smell it like 10 blocks away. So if you don't invite them, they're coming anyway.
Okay. We are going to hear from Sam in just a moment, and he's going to speak to us about a particular passage in one of the Gospels, namely John. And if you're online, you'll be able to see that in the chat. There's a copy paste of that passage there. And if you're in the room, then out in your handouts, there is a script of that in front of you. So if you don't mind, I'll read the passage and then I'll invite Sam to start speaking to us. John 15:12-14. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. Thanks, Sam.
Well, just last year, my little boy turned 10 and we had a birthday party, but because of COVID, we had to do it online. So I didn't think any of his friends would turn up, but all his friends turned up, which I thought was amazing because the other year I turned 50, but I didn't throw any birthday party because I didn't think anyone would want to turn up. A friend of mine at church said the greatest miracle that Jesus ever did was not rising from the dead. No, the greatest miracle that Jesus ever did was that he was a man in his 30s, and yet he had 12 friends. Yes, one of those friends did betray him, but hey, at least it was a friend that betrayed him. See, right now in Australia, loneliness is an epidemic. We've never been more connected and yet never more disconnected. So what can we do about loneliness? That's the question we're going to talk about today. And loneliness is a problem. A Lifeline survey in Australia found that 60 to 80% of Australians say they are lonely, and it is a problem. And it is a real problem. This is Susan Pinker in her TED Talk, and she said that just like we have a biological need for water, we also have a biological need for friendship. And the number one indicator for how long we will live is not how much we exercise. It's not how much weight we lose. It's not whether we've stopped smoking or not. The number one indicator for how long we live is the quality of our social relationships, which is why another famous study shows that loneliness is as likely to kill you as smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day. So what causes this loneliness, and what can we do about it? How can we find freedom from loneliness? Here I suggest 5 things, and this will come in the form of a 20-minute talk from me now, followed by question and answer from you guys. So as I'm talking, think of whatever question you want to ask and text or write those questions in. So how can we escape loneliness? Here I suggest 5 things. Number 1, friendships need shared moments. When I lived in the USA, I played rugby. Now, the guys I played with were big guys. They were either firefighters or military. And I was this tiny little Asian, but I used to win man of the match every game because I was the only one who knew the rules to the game. So I made a lot of good friends. But these days, we don't stay in touch much anymore. This New York Times article asks, why is it hard to make friends over 30? And they say friendships need frequent, effortless interactions. And so my rugby friends and I, we don't meet frequently anymore. And if we did, it would take a lot of effort. This study asks, well, how do friendships form? And they find that friendships need proximity. And that's why most of our friendships come from school, from work, or from sport. But these days, it's hard to find proximity because of urbanization. We're just strangers. We're nameless faces in the crowd, and we move around so much. We're always changing jobs, changing schools, changing cities. So it's hard to find proximity. Number 2, friendships also need a story. They say the happiest generation last century was a generation that lived through the Depression, the Blitz, and the war. Why would that be? Well, because they had a shared common vision. They had a shared common story. But these days, it's hard to find a shared common story. And so the unhappiest generation is a generation that lives right now. 10 years ago, the number one reason why you would see a doctor in Australia was for the common cold. But now, today, the number one reason for seeing a doctor is for stress, anxiety, and depression. We are the saddest generation that has almost ever lived. And as I mentioned the other week, this is hard to believe because if you could pick any time to be alive, it would be right now because we own more things, we live longer, we have free Wi-Fi at McDonald's, and yet we're the saddest generation that's ever lived. And one of those reasons is we are lonely. And we are lonely because we got told to do whatever it takes to be happy, but that just made us more miserable. And we got told to live for ourselves, but that just made us isolated and cut off and lonely. Number 3, friendships need sacrifice. This is Sebastian Junger in his book, Tribe. And Sebastian Junger is not a Christian, but he interviews soldiers, and he found that soldiers say they actually miss being at war. They don't miss the bad stuff, but they miss the good stuff. And what they miss is this: they have camaraderie, they have belonging, they have a tribe. And they say, with a tribe, I had someone who would die for me and someone I would die for. And that's why soldiers will share a blanket. They will give away their last bottle of water. They will charge over the trenches for their buddy. Why? They say, because they would have done the same for me. And that is the essence of tribe. And sociologists say, as human beings, we need a tribe of 150 people. We need a circle of friends of about 30, and we need a tight inner circle of 3 to 5 friends. These are the friends we call on in an emergency. We need a lift to the hospital. We need to borrow some money. We need an emergency babysitting with no notice. But these days in Australia, we have no one to call. And that's why we would rather drive 20 minutes to the shops for eggs than knock on the neighbor's door. Number 4, friendships need security and safety. So far, we've looked at external social factors for why it's hard to make friends, but maybe there are internal factors as well that make it hard for us to make friends. And here we have to ask the question, well, what sort of friend am I? And here I learned a lot from this podcast I heard from Dr. Monica Johnson, How Do Boundaries and Self-Esteem Affect Your Relationships? And she talks about what psychologists call the relationship grid. And the relationship grid looks like this, and it has a vertical and horizontal axis. So let's break it down slowly. On the vertical axis, we look at security, self-esteem. How secure do I feel in and within myself? And we want to be in that Goldilocks spot right in the middle. See, if we have low self-esteem, we're down the bottom where we feel shame. We think we're worthless. I'm an idiot. I'm hopeless. But if we have low esteem as well, sometimes we find esteem by looking down on others. Here we're grandiose. We think the others, well, they're idiots. They're worthless. They're shameful. But we want to be in the middle where we have a healthy amount of security in and within ourselves. On the horizontal axis, we look at safety. How safe do we feel in relationships? And so we're down this end. I'm trying to work out which one it is for you. That one. If we try to be too safe, we put the walls up, the boundaries are high. So here we're safe, but we're never connected. We're always alone. Or maybe for safety, we need relationships. So now we become dependent on others. We need others for affirmation and validation. And here, ironically, we become unsafe because we enter unsafe relationships, and relationships can become very toxic. So let's put it all together now. So trying to work out the quadrants for you. Let's put it all together. Yeah. So we're down here where we need others for validation and affirmation, but at the same time, we're down on ourselves. Here we become manipulative in our relationships. But down in the next quadrant where we don't feel safe in relationships, so we put the walls high, where the boundaries are high, we're disconnected, and we're down on ourselves. Well, here we're going to be withdrawn and even depressed in our relationships. In the opposite quadrant, here we look down on others, but at the same time, we need them for validation and affirmation. Well, here now we become controlling, abusive, angry in our relationships. And in the adjacent quadrant where we avoid relationships because we don't feel safe, but we look down on other people, well, now we become indifferent and passive aggressive in our relationships. So this relationship grid asks the question, well, who am I in these relationships? Because we want to be right in the middle, safe in our relationships and secure in who we are. And here we become the sort of person who finds it easy to make friends, and we're a good friend and people want to be friends with us. But where do we find the strength for this? And this brings me to number 5. Friendships actually need strength. Just like physical fitness needs strength, and here we need oxygen, we need fuel, we need muscle. Friendships also need its own version of strength, oxygen, fuel, and muscle. And here in the Christian tradition, I find a lot of strength in the person of Jesus. And I'm using this picture today because I think Jesus would have looked like this if he was around today, because we know he was not a white person. He did like going to his parties, according to the Bible. Why? He was always going there to make friends. People used to criticize him. Jesus, why do you party so much? And Jesus says, well, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, it's the sick who need a doctor. I've come to seek and save the lost. Why? So I can make friends. And Jesus says, I have called you friends in today's Bible reading. And he does that by seeking, saving the lost, by in the end sacrificing himself for his friends. And Jesus says this, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And so Jesus becomes not just my example of friendship, but he becomes my empowerment, my strength for friendships. Because think of those things that we just said we needed for friendship. We needed security and safety. We needed sacrifice. We needed story. And we needed shared moments. Where Jesus becomes my security and safety, because I find all the validation I need in Jesus. I find unconditional love. He loves me just the way I am. He fulfills me. He forgives me. That's the friend I need. Also, Jesus sacrifices himself for me. And so that gives me the model and the strength to be a sacrifice to others. I'm also part of a bigger story, the Jesus story, the God story, the gospel, where I know there's a God who loves me, who made me, who sent his son to save me. I'm part of a bigger story. So everything I have has purpose, has meaning, has direction, has hope. And I have a shared moment, because the Bible also calls Jesus Emmanuel, which is God with us, God sharing his life with us. So we have a permanent shared moment with Jesus. It's interesting, at the start of this talk, I quoted Susan Pinker in her TED talk, where she said, in the same way we have a biological need for water, we have a biological need for friendship, where Jesus calls himself living water, meaning we almost have a biological, spiritual need for Jesus. And Jesus fulfills that need by being our friend. Just a few months ago, I decided to lay down some topsoil in my backyard. And to do that, I had to order 4 tons of topsoil. And there it is, dumped on my front lawn. And I had to get it into the backyard and lay this topsoil. So what did I do? I called a friend. And there's my friend, Adam. You can see him there in the back corner, laying down the topsoil for me. Why would Adam do that? Because that's what friends do. They sacrifice a weekend. And I did what friends do. I gave Adam a shared moment with me. And that's what friendships need, a shared moment. And Jesus does more than that, because Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us, God sharing his life with us. And that gives me not just the model, but the power to be a good friend. Well, that's it from me. And I look forward to hearing more from you guys during question and answer time.
Thanks very much, Sam. I really appreciate that insight. And as you were speaking, a few of the extreme characterizations kind of tagged people that I'd interacted with over time. So it was a bit scary. Hopefully not too much.
That's right. You're putting people you know in each of those quadrants. Yep.
So, ladies,
but of course, we're the one right in the middle, aren't we? Because we're the only normal one in the room.
Okay, I've got a live question. So Sorry, didn't hear the question. I think this mic may be the extra one. Let me just repeat it. Secondly, firstly, most importantly, did Adam get a case of beer, or as I was thinking earlier, maybe shared in some brisket? You can answer that question first.
Oh, totally. It's the beer economy, isn't it? If you give someone a $40 case of beer, they think the world of you. But if you give them $40, I think, oh, $40, is that all you're giving me? Somehow beer just elevates the worth of what you give them.
I'll let you use this mic to ask.
Right, good point about the beer. Thankfully, my clients don't pay me with beer. Can you hear me?
You don't have to pay tax on beer, do you?
Don't think so. Maybe a fringe benefit. Hard to say.
Shh.
That's right. Only talking to a room full of lawyers here. I choose not to answer that question from now on.
Okay, so moving on to a more serious thing. I mean, with your talk, it focuses on friendship, perhaps on an individual level. Could you tell us about community, so Christian community, friendship in a wider sense?
Yeah, just like the sociologists say, we need a tribe of 150 people, a circle of friends about 30, and an inner circle of 3 to 5. We can function at any of those levels. We can be the tribe, the circle of friends of 30, or the inner circle of 3 to 5. Like, we can't cope with more than 3 to 5 really tight friends. So we just got to be realistic. But as I was pointing, right now in the West, it's the flip side. We don't even have those 3 or 5 friends. But as Christians and as the church, we can function by being that 30 or the 150 as well.
Thanks, Sam. I've got a question. How do we collect new friends as we age and many of our friends depart from this planet?
Yeah, it's fascinating because that New York Times article asks exactly the same question, how to make friends over 30. There's a book called Being Mortal by a doctor in the USA. I just can't remember his name, but Being Mortal, and talks about that whole phenomenon where
Gwanda is his name.
Okay, great.
Dr. Atul Gwanda.
Great, thank you. And yeah, how the number of our friendships drop. And we all know how, when we were at university, we had 200 friends and we had to invite them all to our 21st birthday party. And if we got married in our 20s, now we think, oh, who don't I invite? Oh my gosh, if I invite this person, now I have to invite everyone. But now we're at the age where we can't even think of a person to call up on a Friday night to watch Netflix with. But all these studies show, okay, the number of friends drop after 30, but the quality, the intensity in the friendship increases. So just, again, recognizing the stage of life we're in and knowing that the number of friends will naturally drop, but just invest even more in the few friends that we have.
And Sam, on the other end of the spectrum, any reflections on why millennials find it so hard to make decisions and why their fear of missing out, such a strong fear at the moment?
Yeah, so many good reasons. I heard a podcast where this millennial said, you got to understand what it's like for us. We get told we got to do whatever it takes to be happy. And so we're always for everything. Well, what would that thing be? And then she said, well, for our parents' generation, they got told they had to do whatever it takes to be successful. And they found that, okay, that led to emptiness and unfulfillment. But then she said, but what the heck? At least they got a car, a house, and a job out of that. We got nothing. And now we're permanently trying to do whatever it takes to be happy. That's just making us more stressed, more tired, more miserable. And I think, as I mentioned in my earlier talk on freedom from anxiety, we actually don't know what we're looking for. And so millennials then, you end up in paralysis analysis. Like, okay, you're immobile now because you don't know what you're looking for. Also, a book called iGen looks at the iGen generation, and it says the problem is for them, the millennials, it's our fault and the boomers' fault. We have delayed their adolescence, delayed their adulthood, so they actually can't make decisions because you and I, we came out at 23 with a university degree and we could work. They can't come out until they're 28 or 35 with 5 degrees, and only then are they allowed to work. And that's why everything's delayed. They're getting driver's licenses later than we were, and so everything's been delayed for them as well.
Thanks, Sam. And another question then, just to sort of delve into the distinction, Christian, non-Christians, what's the differentiators between, Christians that have friendships and are they any different from, regular friendships?
Yeah, in the Christian tradition, we believe all good things come from God. You don't have to believe in God to enjoy the good things like beer and wine and barbecue. And so friendships are a good thing from a good God to enjoy. So you don't have to know God to enjoy good friendships. But at the same time, I think there's a special bond that Christians have with each other because we believe Jesus is alive, his spirit lives in us, and we all, as Christians, enjoy the same spirit living in us. And the Bible uses community to describe what it's like to be a Christian. It says you have actually joined Team Jesus. You are now part of the family. We're all brothers and sisters, and we all belong to the one body, the one vine, many branches analogy. And so I actually bring friends from other religions to join me at church, and they all point out, wow, you guys have community in a way we don't. In our religion, we just go to the temple, we worship, we pray, and we go home again. We don't talk to anyone afterwards, but you guys hang around. So there's a bond that we have as a church, as a Christian church, which other people don't seem to enjoy. And I really think it's because we believe we have the same spirit living in us. So it's not just that we believe the same things and we do the same things. We actually believe we are one with each other in the same team, in the same family, in the same body.
Thanks, Sam. Just a reflection then on a Christian person then that thinks, you know, still feeling pretty lonely. They know Jesus, but what sort of advice or encouragement would you give to that person?
Yes. So if we're lonely and a Christian, in one sense, we could say, well, Jesus is all I need. And sometimes Jesus is all we need, and he might be the only option, and he is the living water. So he fulfills all our needs. But at the same time, we do thirst for human contact, human friendships. And so maybe looking at that relationship grid, think, okay, where am I on that relationship grid? Even though I'm a Christian, I believe in Jesus, I have validation. Maybe I am skewed a little bit some way. So how can knowing Jesus put me more in the center and be secure enough and just put myself out there and try to make friends? By definition, half of us in this room are introverts. Like, we get exhausted from people, exhausted from small talk. But maybe, and I'm an introvert, but whenever we do make conversation and talk to people, it usually ends well. Everything's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So maybe just say, you know what, it goes against my nature. It's against what I want, but I'm just going to have to go out there and just make conversation and talk to strangers and just see what happens.
Thanks, Sam. We have another question from the floor.
Hi, Sam. All right. My question is dealing with the people have a different view within the Christian fellowship. For instance, that I'm encountered such kind of difficulties in recent, relationship talk with my Christian partner. How can we deal with such kind of an issue, or how do we deal with such kind of a people? Thank you.
Yeah, how can Christians who practice the same things, believe the same things, and have different views on some divisive issues? And, you know, it could be anything on whether you should send your kids to a public school versus a private school, what your views are on the environment, and even which party you vote for in politics. And it's interesting that even Jesus' own disciples were a little bit divided over some things. And Jesus used to say, hey, well, basically, we're all on the same side. We all believe in the same Jesus. So I think we just got to say, okay, Jesus transcends whatever differences I have. I still have to love the other person. I might not understand or ever agree with the other person, but right now I have a bond that transcends those differences, which is interesting, which is the difference between friendship and family. Because friendship, we can choose our friends. So the instant we have a disagreement, we can choose to make a different friend. But with family, we can't choose family. And that's why Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners can be so difficult. You get sat next to that uncle with a very different political views, and now you got to make conversation. But maybe that's one way to say it. In the Christian tradition, we are actually now family. Jesus has chosen both of us. So now I have to find a way to get along.
Thanks, Sam. You can't see me, but I'm out in the crowd of people here at the Law Society, and I have another question.
Hey, Sam. So my question is around that shared experience. How much do you think the refusal to admit our weaknesses and ask other people to help keeps us from that shared experience?
Yeah, that's right. So friendships need sacrifice, and sacrifice needs trust. And if we can't be open and vulnerable, well, obviously there's no trust there. And maybe what's happened is, now going a bit further out on a limb, if we stop believing in a God who loves and forgives us, we too stop loving and forgiving, and we can't trust the other person to love and forgive. So, what's the name of the UK author? He's written that book, The Madness of Crowds. And he says, right now, no one says sorry because there is no forgiveness. And I've just read about some professor at Yale who's just lost their job because of a badly worded tweet. And no matter how much he apologized, he's still lost his job. And right now there is no forgiveness in society. So there's no point in admitting our vulnerabilities. There's no point in saying sorry. And that's why I think we need to rediscover the Christian tradition, where at the very foundation of the Christian tradition is there's a God who loves, who forgives, who restores, who reconciles, and you can start again with this God. And if we have this as our common bond and foundation, then maybe we can be vulnerable again to each other. But yes, you're right. One of the reasons why it's so hard to make friends is we don't be vulnerable. And that's why we don't borrow eggs from the neighbor, because the instant we've asked for a favor, we've made ourselves vulnerable now.
Thanks so much, Sam. It's been very helpful to further unpack your insights from your talk. As we close today, I want to just thank everyone for battling the elements and make it here in person. If you're at home or at work or watching online, we are back. We're back in the Law Society building, Phillip Street in the center of town, next to the Supreme Court, bar one. And you're very welcome to join us in 2 weeks' time for the next talk, which will be by David Robertson, and answering the topic, Sapiens, What is the Humanity? And reflecting on the book by, and I'm going to not pronounce this right, but I'll give it a crack, Yuval Noah Harari, Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind, of Humankind. Now, that's in 2 weeks' time. But if you've had questions arising and you just haven't had the opportunity to address those in the course of this talk, then we want to keep that conversation going. We encourage you to fill in the feedback form on the back of the hard copy documents or on the link in front of you on the chat. And we also want to welcome you to consider joining a hope group. A hope group meets on the alternate weeks at the same time in a cafe in the city. And you can think a little bit more about some of the questions and some about the things that Jesus has said, or the accounts of Jesus in the 4 biographies in the Gospels, and about what hope there is in the world. And to do this, again, fill those details in on the feedback form and leave some details. And a member of City Legal will be in contact with you. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mark Street. It's been my pleasure to host this morning, and I'm very glad that you're able to be here. And I'm very thankful to you, Sam, for battling the COVID, all the whatever medication you're on, mate. You're presenting very well. I haven't seen you cough or splutter, or there's no fluids coming out anywhere. It's really been quite pleasant to see you on such a big screen, because we can see much detail, right? You've obviously got a good morning routine. So thanks very much. Thanks very much for enduring and for being here with us virtually and in a safe way. See you soon.